Hello and welcome to today's FCICA webinar. My name is Angelie Velasquez. I'm with Freestone and I'll be producing today's web conference. I'd like to run through a few housekeeping items before we kick off the meeting. First, I'd like to go over the audio for today's meeting. In order to listen, we do recommend that you listen over your computer speakers. You'll want to make sure they are turned on and the volume is turned up. If you do need to dial into the conference at any time, you will find the dial-in information listed in the lower left portion of your screen. However, we do want to emphasize that to optimize your viewing experience, listening to the audio over your computer speakers is the best option. Next up, I'd like to discuss the Q&A for today. We will be addressing your questions at the end of the presentation, but you are welcome to type them in at any time. If you would like to ask a question, please click on the Q&A tab on the top side of your screen and then select Ask New Question. To download a copy of today's materials, click on the Handouts tab. And finally, of course, as is true with any web technology, the web conference is only as good as your internet connection. If you do have any technical difficulties, your best bet is to close all your browsers and log back into the conference the same way you did the first time. Great, I think we're ready to begin the conference. Kim, if you're ready, the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you, Angelie. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kim Young. I'm the Interim Director of Programs with FCICA, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. This program is being recorded, so to maintain the integrity of the recording, all attendees will remain muted, and the recorded session will be housed on the FCICA Member Center and this education portal, as well as featured on our website and YouTube channel. So we've got some upcoming events here. I know you've seen them rotating through, but we're just going to talk through those quick. If you're not familiar with FCICA, we are the resource for premier flooring contractors, and you can see some of the things we do here, lots of webinars and educational content to help you guys out. One of our flagship programs is the SIM program, and it is originally designed to be an online course, and right now we're doing SIM live online. That'll be starting next week. So there are about 10 modules that take some time to go through, and we know not everybody has the time to, or has the time to put aside for that, so we're helping you guys out by doing that every other week. You can jump in and do one module at a time, just so you have it on your calendar to make sure that you get through it. We've also got some more upcoming webinars. So this one is our monthly educational webinar for April. It'll be going on Wednesday, April 15th. I believe that should be at 1 p.m. And that'll be hosted by Jeff Johnson of MAPE. He'll be talking about Adhesives 101. And you're welcome to register for that webinar now on our website, fcica.com/webinars. We've also got Milliken coming up next week, another product webinar. If you're interested in learning about more of their products, that'll be happening on April 2nd. And then, as I said earlier, SIM is kind of one of our main programs. We do have an in-person version, but we're putting that on hold right now, so we're really focusing on allowing people to do this online while they may be stuck at home. And having some extra time to do some training. So if you're interested in doing that, you can reach out to me. You can go to our website, fcica.com/sim. There's a lot more information about that program and what to do if you're interested in becoming a SIM. We've also got our magazine. This is our brand new issue that was just posted for spring 2020. It goes over challenges on the job site, and it has a bunch of great articles from our certified installation managers and other members about challenges that you may run into on a job site. We've got a great article about becoming a female project manager, as well as our annual Platinum Member Product Spotlight. So that is also available on our website under our resources. Great. Any views and opinions expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect any official views or positions of FCICA. Please excuse this brief pause as I initiate the recording. Welcome to the FCICA Product Webinar Series. We are very pleased to have Wayne Highlander of Bona with us today. Wayne, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Kim, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on what part of the country that you're in. Just a little background about myself. My name is Wayne Highlander. I'm the National Sales Manager for Bona Adhesives. I was a contractor, hardwood floor contractor for about 30 years. And I was an inspector for the Contractor State License Board, and then pretty active with the National Wood Flooring Association in their installation classes and sanding and finishing classes. So you'll be happy to know that I'm not going to read through every single bullet point on the presentation. I will, however, do that on the first one because these are the learning objectives for today. There's 4 of them. Number 1, how to specify wood flooring adhesives for longevity and positive human health. Number 2, why subfloor preparation is critical for long-term performance. Number 3, how the installation materials and methods will impact a wood floor's life cycle. And finally, number 4, how responsible adhesive specifications improve indoor air and sound quality. So, floors usually account for more surface area than anything else on the project, except perhaps maybe the walls. So they have an outsized effect on indoor air quality. Adults and children and pets and will walk on them and play on them and work on them, and we breathe anything they off-gas or emit. Since flooring may take up thousands of square feet, consider the large quantities of raw materials like the glues, the finishes, the adhesives and cleaners, and all their associated environmental impacts. But you can select adhesive that will help you maximize the quality of the indoor environment while minimizing damage to the natural environment. So, whose procedures do I follow? The Wood Flooring Installation Guidelines or the NWFA guidelines. The National Wood Flooring Association is an international nonprofit trade association representing all segments of the hardwood flooring industry. As a matter of fact, they just changed their installation guidelines in 2019. I think they're up to 180 pages now. Most adhesive manufacturer instructions are maybe 1 to 2 pages. So who defines what's proper and who's to follow? Anytime that they're not in concert, the manufacturer guidelines always trump the National Wood Flooring Association guidelines. And in any case, proper preparation coupled with proper installation materials yields proper positive results. So we're going to talk about moisture and moisture's effect on hardwood floors. And no matter where you called in from today, flooring can be successfully installed. It's perhaps maybe just in a different manner. The challenges of a flooring project in Florida might be completely different than the challenges of a project in Arizona. If we're dropping wood off in Florida to acclimate, it's likely we're trying to wait till the moisture content in the wood comes up and becomes higher. If we're dropping the floor off in Arizona to acclimate, it's also likely that we're leaving it on the job site so it comes down in moisture before it's ready to be installed. I lived in San Francisco Bay Area, and anybody that's ever been to San Francisco in July can probably attest to the fact that it can very easily be 62 degrees and freezing cold, and yet 20 miles inland, you could be at 90 degrees. So there's also little microclimates that can definitely affect your project. But it's also interesting to note that a floor that goes up in temperature from 30 degrees to 100 degrees moves only half as much as a floor that goes from 40% relative humidity to 45% relative humidity, and kind of shows you the impact that moisture will have on a floor. And of course, this is a map of the average moisture range across the United States, but do keep in mind the microclimates that can dramatically affect your project. So this slide here is, as I said, I've been in the industry for a long time, and I think this is maybe one of the most important slides, and a lesson I learned very early on from an old-timer, and that lesson is this. First, you get the building ready for the flooring, then you get the flooring ready for the building. Now, anybody that's on this call, if you look at the picture on the top right-hand screen that does commercial work, there's one thing missing in that picture, and there's probably about 10 different trades guys walking through it. I mean, we hardly ever get pristine conditions like that to install our floors. The picture in the bottom left is a picture of somebody acclimating solid wood flooring to a job site. And by the way, that is the proper way to acclimate solid wood flooring, where they have the bundles stacked and cross-stacked like that. It lets the air move throughout the wood better. I don't know anything about fish or fish tanks, but I have a colleague that does, and it was interesting to note that when you buy a fish or a guppy, you don't just take it and dump it in your fish tank. You acclimate it first, leave it in the bag that you bought it in, and then the temperatures get closer together, then you release him into the tank. And that guppy there probably cost about $3. I've seen sometimes job sites that are 1,000 square feet and not acclimated at all. So, and by the way, acclimation is not a time thing; it's a science thing. Some people say, "Well, I let it sit in there for 3 days, or 5 days, or 7 days." But I talked about the National Wood Flooring Association's guidelines. It's about 180 pages. I actually think this is perhaps the most important page. The ideal moisture of wood flooring will be the moisture content at which the wood reaches equilibrium with the installation environment. At this equilibrium, moisture content will stop absorbing or shedding moisture, which prevents some of the physical properties that can occur in wood flooring. So in every market, we're looking for that temperature and relative humidity sweet spot where the wood is going to live comfortably. And that's called the dimensional change coefficient. Every species is assigned a dimensional change coefficient. In other words, maple certainly does not expand and contract at the same rate that oak does. Brazilian cherry flooring moves dramatically different than say, a walnut floor. But we can determine now, depending on the species of the wood and the environment we put that species of wood into, what it's going to do. And by looking at the dimensional change coefficient, we can determine that if we put it into a room with 62 degrees temperature and 48 degrees relative humidity, what that floor will actually do. Moisture in wood. So never install a wood flooring over a known moisture condition. It is compulsory practice to always test for moisture regardless of conditions, so that the unknown condition can then become a known condition and can be handled appropriately. I've always said that moisture mitigation is risk mitigation. And so on this slide, I think there's maybe 11 or 12 different potential sources of moisture on a job site. And the scary thing about this is that most of them are unseen. I made a living as a contractor, and I tried never to break 2 rules. And one of those rules are, if my eyes don't see it, then I don't believe it. And number 2 is never rely on someone else telling me the conditions have been checked and you're good to go. And one of the reasons for that is I used to be a construction worker. I used to be a union laborer. And every day I showed up to work and we placed concrete. So we would have the concrete forms, and we would put the 6 mil visqueen down, and on top of that, the rebar would go. The problem is, let's say it's been raining for 3 or 4 or 5 days before that. We would take rebar and we would poke holes in all that visqueen to let the water run out. Now, it wasn't malicious. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know what the effect that was having on the project, but it made our life easier. And that concrete, when it may have left the concrete yard, may have been spec'd a certain water to cement ratio, but not by the time we got done with it. Because if you ever labor, you work with concrete, and you see it coming down the chute, and it's hard and it's stiff and it's difficult to move, we would jump up into the truck and take the water hose and squirt water into the mix. Now, that made our job a whole lot easier. It's going to slide down the chute a lot easier. It's going to be easier for us to place the concrete, but we've now just taken that concrete and made it very porous. And the hardwood floor contractor would have no idea. So, consequently, I approach every slab like there's contaminants on it and the moisture is too high. That slab needs to prove to me that it's not going to cause my project to fail. And that mindset is the one that I took with me throughout the years in this trade. So let's see there's a lot going on under the surface. If you ever see a duck floating down a river, it looks very tranquil and peaceful and what have you. But as we know, there can be a lot going on underneath the surface. So we'll talk about some of those things. I actually like, one of the things I like best about this slide is there's 2 guys pointing the finger at each other. Unfortunately, when it comes to subfloor prep, it can kind of fall into a gray area. the GC doesn't have it in the budget or the time, or sometimes it falls to the flooring contractor, who might resent the fact that it was supposed to already be done. Now it's going to come out of his pocket. So I've even seen guys go back to the GC and say, you know what, this floor isn't flat like it needs to be. We need you to, fix this, and have them actually make the condition worse. And I always think to myself, can you imagine if they approach hanging doors or installing crown molding the way they did subfloor prep? For us contractors, sometimes what they give us to work on is mind-boggling. And after all, if a door doesn't hang right, or if the crown molding isn't quite right, it's not going to be near as much disruption. My father-in-law was the flooring contractor for 52 years, and he would tell me when he's bidding jobs and he's maybe talking to the building owner or he's talking to the general, and as he's walking around talking to them with his feet, he's feeling for every little undulation in that slab. Maybe some high spots that need to be grinded down, maybe some low spots that needed to be filled. And he said that's what's called, and I'm going to do air quotes now, a floorman's foot. And that in time, I too would develop a floorman's foot. He told me that he was so good that he could step on a mosquito and tell me whether or not it was circumcised. Now, I don't know if I'll ever get that good, but I certainly got his point. So there's two types of testing. There's qualitative testing, and there's quantitative testing. Over the course of my career, I have heard the following things. You know what? It smells dry. It should be good to go. Or the slab looks dry, so we're in good shape. Or, it's old enough to be dry. And my favorite, all-encompassing, I can always tell. There was a time that we didn't have qualitative testing. That we didn't have the tools that we have today. And so certainly technology has moved us along, and I think we should take advantage of it. There's two tests that the NWFA recognizes, one being the calcium chloride test, and the other test being the relative humidity test, the RH test. Be aware that, in my opinion, the X-ray the calcium chloride test is more like an X-ray, right? I mean, it shows you a little bit what's going on. A much more thorough test, because you're drilling in 40% the depth of the slab, is the RH test. And the RH test is a much more accurate test. And now, by the way, the test results used to take 72 hours, and now they're down to 24 hours to get the test results back. So all I'm going to say here on this slide is this. The GC needs to get the job to come in on time and under budget. The flooring contractor is equally under the same amount of pressure to complete the project. And the building owner, well, he or she, all they want is a trouble-free floor. And for these reasons, in my personal and professional opinion, I think sometimes the testing is better off being done by a third party. I mean, they don't have a dog in the fight. And after all, when the slab is high, you're left with just a few choices, and most of those are bad. One, you can cave to the pressure and roll the dice, and hope that the floor, you don't get that call 3 months, 6 months down the road that the floor is cupping. Or you can delay the job. And, I've lived in the real world. I know what that's like, what that does. I mean, the expectations that are put on us, and the trades that are coming behind us, and this is your window of time, and this is where my schedule is, and I can completely understand those concerns and struggles. Or you can use a moisture that can handle an adhesive that can handle the amount of moisture on the job site, and use a moisture mitigation plan. So the impacts of moisture on wood flooring. If you've ever seen a gym floor go south, it's amazing the power of wood flooring. So knowing how to repair and install flooring is as important to the safety of the end user as it is to the longevity of the flooring. Slip and fall hazards increase with floor failures, cupping, dislodging, cracking, all these things that are related to improperly installed flooring or poorly prepared slabs. And that's not even to mention the economic disruption and possibly the health disruption and issues with mold and what have you. So, Why do adhesives matter to your project? I've heard people say, well, the adhesive I used on the last couple projects worked just fine, so I don't know why it failed on this one. It could have been that the conditions have been such that it could handle the moisture on those last two jobs, but it didn't have the firepower to hold the moisture on this one that you're on now because of the elevated moisture conditions. I have a colleague, and I showed him this slide, and he says, yeah, you need to pair the right adhesive with the flooring material, and that's critical. Like Chianti goes with pizza and Pinot Noir goes with barbecue. I don't know what the hell he was talking about because I don't drink wine, but I get his point there. And also, I've also, being in the industry for a while, I hear guys say, well, that the wood flooring is still alive. It can still take in moisture. And actually, it's not true. I mean, if you chop a tree down and you kiln dry it and you shape it and turn it into a door, it's not a tree anymore. It is actually dead. It's a door. It just behaves like it's alive. So going back to that slide with equilibrium I mentioned earlier, we want it to be in a healthy environment, and the adhesive is one of those critical components to the environment. Health issues of wood flooring installation. We build these buildings so fast now, and we close them up so fast and so tight that there's a lot of moisture trapped inside these buildings. Certainly one of the concerns, and we're seeing it more and more with people. We're working in these buildings longer and spending more of our life in these buildings, and the indoor air quality is a huge concern. Bona 851 adhesive is zero VOCs, and it's Green Guard certified. And it took a lot of technology for us to do those things without compromising some of the other features of the product. Certainly sound transmission also is a big concern if you've ever been in a building with really poor acoustics. So you might be familiar with LEED, WELL standards also. The WELL building standard is a performance-based system for measuring, certifying, and monitoring features of the built environment that impact human health and comfort. So as I said when I started this presentation, floors usually account for more surface area than anything else in the house except perhaps the walls. So they do have an outsized effect on indoor air quality. We spend a lot of time working on them, playing on them, living on them, and we do breathe everything that they emit. People are becoming more and more aware of that. Since flooring takes up thousands of square feet, large quantities of raw material are also involved, and so those impacts should be considered as well. But by selecting the right adhesive, you can maximize the quality of your indoor environment and minimize the damage to the environment. So let's see here. I skipped a slide. I'm going to go back one here. Okay, so not all adhesives are the same. I talk to architects all the time, and a lot of times what they'll do is they'll go back and use a boilerplate spec from maybe they've been using 5 or 10 years ago because maybe it's easy to cut and paste or it's a name that they remember. Construction practices have changed in the last few years. The changes in flooring and material has changed dramatically. And of course, fast-paced construction has changed the game. We are putting floors now in environments we never asked to put them in before. We are placing greater demands on our adhesives. They needing to be zero VOCs and Green Guard certified. We're putting in plank floors. I was in Cincinnati, I think about 3 weeks ago now, that the project had 20-inch wide floors in it. I mean, that was something that was unheard of years ago. But with today's new technology, that's achievable. So they said, Wayne, you got the job. You're national sales manager. Congratulations. So while I was a contractor, I had made the switch to Bona adhesives about a year and a half before I ever even knew anybody at Bona or talked to anybody at Bona or had any relationships. But when I went to work for Bona, I knew what I liked about the Bona adhesive. I knew what my guys liked about it and what have you. But now that I had to go on this journey, I had to understand, okay, well, what exactly makes one adhesive different from the other? I mean, at the end of the day, they all stick a board down to a substrate. So while I was on this journey, when I was trying to do comparisons, I guess for lack of a better word, what I got a lot of time was like marketing jargon, like it holds really good, or really good with moisture. When I want to do the comparisons, I think aside from the the MSDS sheets and what have you, I think there's some things that you have to consider in the adhesives. That's the shear strength, the tensile strength, the elongation, the permeability, and the sound ratings. So shear strength, when that floor wants to go in motion, when there's moisture coming up and that floor wants to move side to side, it's the shear strength that needs to have the power to hold that floor in place. I talked about the gym floor that didn't have the adhesive, didn't have what it took to hold that moisture down or that floor from moving sideways. Tensile strength, for quarter sawn floors. Tensile strength is what holds the floor from moving up and down. It's super important, especially if you're doing end grain floors or quarter sawn floors. And I think we need to know that for comparisons. Elongation. If you picture, I think the best way to describe elongation, if you have a real stiff rubber band and you stretch it out and you let it snap back, the ability to adhesive to allow a floor to move, maybe for seasonal movement and come back, is very important. On the flip side, if you think of like a saltwater taffy that stretches out but does not come back, so you can see that elongation is important. Permeability, and we talked about moisture and how that what that can do to a floor. Permeability is the property for allowing passage of fluids or gases. And when I talked about these ratings and what have you, I always thought to myself, if I could bench press 400 pounds, I'd probably be able to work that into every conversation. If I could only bench press 80 pounds, I probably wouldn't talk about it that much. So I'm going to go through these next slides pretty quickly. These are properties that, this is, for instance, this first one I believe is an engineered floor. Yep. So, these are properties that we would want in an engineered floor. And, you can see zero VOC is always desirable in any of these, but I'm only going to focus on two of these. That initially may not sound as important, but I'll tell you why I think they are. One is easy to clean. And as an inspector and flooring contractor over the years, I can't begin to tell you how many times I've seen adhesive not being able to be removed after the project was done, and it dried on the surface, and now many urethanes will etch the finish, and even if you can get it off, you can look back and see where you have like a dull spot on the floor, which equates to now you're looking at board replacement and those type of things. So the other thing I'm going to focus on is the easy to spread. The average age of the installer is getting older and older. Arm fatigue can show up in a few different ways. Wear and tear on the installer, but also when your arm is hanging off your shoulders at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because you're tired of spreading adhesive that's hard to move, a funny thing starts to happen to your spread rates. I always thought it would be interesting if you could look at the spread rates in the first few hours of the day versus towards the end of the day when the guy's arms are getting tired and now you're starting to float the adhesive more, and of course your spread rates go down. End grain blocks, I talked about how important tensile strength is to this type of flooring, and I'll go through these quickly here. White plank floors, again, we're looking at longer and longer floors, putting more stresses on the adhesive, and with today's technology, and I'll get into that a little bit later. This one's with the walls and ceilings. America, thank God, has always had a love affair with wood floors. I mean, they add, warmth and beauty, almost a tranquil type feeling to any building, and that's why we're starting to see them in more places that we didn't see them in the past. Now they're moving up walls and they're moving on to ceilings. We have a product called R880, and the feature that you would want in that is something that has tenacious grab. Grabs real quick, grabs real fast, and has great shear strength. So another quality of adhesives. So, and now you have to look at material selection for the substrates, right? Because not only it has to get along with the flooring, but it also the subfloors underneath them. And we've got concrete and plywood and gypcrete and gypsum underlayments, OSB and Advantech. So all I'm going to say about this one here is on this slide here, if you're installing floors on wood subfloors, the National Wood Flooring Association says that you need to be within 2 percentage points in moisture from the finished floor to the subfloor. Now, it's very hard to get optimum conditions to install flooring, especially on these commercial jobs. And, so guys will put building paper down. In today's fast-paced construction, building paper, I can tell you from experience, if that subfloor is high, it's likely that floor is going to cup. Bona came out with a product called Bona R540. It's a one-component, roll-on moisture membrane, specially designed to mitigate vapor transmission on absorbent and non-absorbent subfloors. That's including gypsum-based underlayments. So you roll out one coat, and now it protects you up to 20% moisture. That is a game changer. My family's been in the business forever, and most of my friends are flooring contractors. And why we had this product out in Europe for quite some time. We brought it over to America, and it has just been fabulous for us and very well received. You do not need to use building paper if you go over top of it. If you're only going to install the floor and you're not going to use adhesives, you only need to wait about an hour or so before you start installing over top of it. OSB. OSB is kind of a different animal. OSB does not handle seasonal changes very well as it relates to holding fasteners. In 2018, the National Wood Flooring Association had their seminar at one of their conferences. And the seminar the most widely attended seminar was on popping, squeaking, creaking hardwood floors. Now, we've gone to engineered floors because they're more dimensionally stable, right? We can sleep at night. They don't move quite as much. But the NWFA has had a spike in calls on these issues. Guys that are installing these engineered floors with these floor runner staple guns using thin gauge staples leave the floors vulnerable to squeaks. Now, keep in mind, the industry trend is wider and wider planks. The wider the plank, the less fasteners per square foot, when really the opposite is what we need. It's a long way across these plank boards to rely only on the engagement of the tongue and groove on one side and the fasteners on the other. It leaves you vulnerable to lateral movement, which in turn leads to squeaks. And that's why you're seeing more nail glue assist installations. So if you imagine you put in, $60,000 worth of pre-finished flooring, and that looks great. The guys staggered the boards real nice and everything, and here's your check. Thanks very much. It's a great job. And only to get that call back a few months later that the floor starting to squeak or pop. And I can tell you that there's nothing that comes out of our mouth that's going to make them feel any better about it. So this is the Bona sausages. The sausages is the same material that's in our pails, the 851. Is a very economical way of stopping this lateral movement and doing a nail glue assist. The nice thing about the sausage guns is the guys are off their knees. I talk about the age of the installer today. So guys then would tell me, Wayne, we love the sausages. Yep, it does a great job. We don't have to worry about moisture anymore, about the lateral movement. But what about the fact that we're not using building paper? So now we're not having moisture protection. But the marriage between the Bona R540 moisture barrier and the sausages has really been I think just really a game changer for us. So I talked about nail glue assist installations. When I talked about the National Wood Flooring Association just changed their guidelines, it also includes a couple pages about the nail glue assist now. Depending on the region, most guys that are, if it's a floor that's 5 inches or wider, are nailing and gluing. In some regions, it's 4 inches and wider. But again, and also, it's been my experience when guys are nailing and gluing with the compressor cords and the things that are, going across the floor, it can be very easy to get the adhesive onto the face of the boards. And the silane adhesive that we have does not stick to plastic. So we do not etch the boards. It's a very easy product to clean off. Advantech. So Advantech has like a wax-type substance on the top of it, and some manufacturers will say, you know what, your best practice is to sand it first, sand the substrate, or take a buffer and hit it with 36 grit or 60 grit, so you get better adhesion. The Bona R540 is a primer for Advantech. It's amazing how much more it'll help that adhesive bond to Advantech, number one, and number two, it's also now a moisture barrier. So, pretty nice system. Stair treads, we're seeing more and more metal components in stair treads. Our Bona silane adhesive sticks extremely well to stair treads as well. And then gypcrete. We play very well with gypcrete. In fact, with Bona R851 silane adhesive, no primer is needed. So you don't have to spend the money on the primer, you don't have to do the labor on the primer, and you don't have to wait for the primer to dry. Gypsum-based concrete substrates tend to be very dusty. So even after thorough vacuuming, primers are typically recommended because many types of adhesives don't have the ability to wet out on the dust on the surface, therefore creating adhesion problems. The Bona R851 is the exception. Through extensive testing and Bona research and development, we've concluded that abrasion and thorough vacuuming prior to the 851 is all you need to do. So when they pour gypcrete, everything that comes to the top, I guess for lack of a better word again, is like a pond scum, right? It doesn't stick very well to it. So you need to braid that first, and to get to where you get more gypsum in, and we stick very well. And incidentally, there's radiant heat in this picture as well. Silane adhesive does not etch plastic tubing on radiant heat, and all I tell people on radiant heat is, don't turn the radiant heat off. I don't think it's ever a very good idea to turn radiant heat off. Better to turn it down to, say, 70 degrees, and maybe it's going to shorten your open time a little bit. But if you do, for some reason, have to turn the radiant heat off, you want to turn it back on very, very slow increments, so they don't shock the floor. Warm board, we also are approved for warm board. We're compatible with that. And then the rubber. So many builders have determined that they do not need to do a double stick when using the Bona silane adhesive because our IIC and STC ratings on the adhesive is enough to meet the sound requirements. That is a huge cost savings in labor, material, and time. However, if they do elect to use the rubber or the cork, we do adhere very well to these. I've talked to people that say, you know what, from the concrete to the rubber, I'll just use an inexpensive adhesive, and I'll use, quote, the better adhesive from the rubber to the flooring, when actually it's better practice to whatever adhesive you use under the cork, you should use on top of the cork, so the shear strengths are not fighting against each other, or one doesn't overwhelm the other. Same thing with cork here. So here's our duck again. Not all adhesives are created equal. So we can talk about some of these things. I say, and I mean this, thank God for urethanes because they kind of got us out of the Stone Ages. Before that, guys were using tar and screeds. And however, in some areas of the country, they're still using tar and screeds, like down in Texas and around the Houston area. I don't think there's a debate anymore where the industry is going. And 9 out of 10 adhesives installations in Europe are installed with silanes. And silane is a form of silicone. Silicone is a moisture rejector and adhesive promoter. And per square foot, you'll use less adhesive with a silane to get the moisture protection that you will urethane. And then you're going to have the added benefits of that. It spreads so much nicer, it cleans up, and tremendous shear strength. I didn't talk about waste. One nice thing about our adhesive, you could open up the pail, use half of the adhesive, put the foil back on, put it back in the van, come back a month later, open it back up, and there's almost no skin over, and what skin over is there comes out very easily. So, on a slab, a urethane adhesive creates a mechanical bond. and silane creates a chemical bond. And a chemical bond is when molecule A combines with molecule B to form a new molecule altogether. And some people will say, well, Wayne, I mean, it's a silane, isn't it kind of like an MS, a modified silane, MS polymer? And that's really not the case. Just for a little background, in 1976, the Japanese company Kanika produced the first resin, filed a patent, and I can't even begin to pronounce what that was. But that patent is the basis for what is known today as MS polymer. Silane adhesives formulations do not use that Kanika patent, and they're considered silane terminated polymers. But now most terminology, most people accept it as silanes. Trying to explain the difference in the two of those. Usually, a silane, you're going to get better moisture protection and shear strength with the silanes. This with the newer technology. So, how do you pick the right adhesives and sound control? I talked about being in a building with really poor acoustics and how that impacts the environment in long term. Suppressing that sound is incredibly important. It's important in custom residential homes. It's important in office buildings and multifamily buildings and condominiums and where businesses are. And we have an excellent IIC and STC rating. And go to this slide here. And so, silane adhesive, where it began, this actually is Copenhagen Airport in this slide. I was there a couple of years ago. And through routine maintenance every year, actually that's an oil finish that's on there. Oil finishes are very easy to maintain without a lot of disruption. And incidentally, Bona has an oil finish that we do very well with. But in any case, the trades guys would come in there and they would section off areas and re-oil the floors. And if some of the boards need to be replaced and repaired, they would do that. The tradesmen came in one particular year. They came in and they didn't have the right adhesive, and they used a silicone caulking for board repairs. It was kind of a light bulb moment for the industry, and actually the genesis of Bona's technology. In America, Bona is known more as a finish manufacturer, but in Europe, I'm sorry about the background noise there. In Europe, Bona is more well known as an adhesive company. However, in America, we make all our adhesive now in Monroe, North Carolina. Type of glue down installations, I kind of talked about these already, so I'm just going to bypass this. And I'm going to go to the trowel. Now, the trowel is nothing more than a measuring device. That's what a trowel is. It's a piece of metal with a wooden handle usually and with notches in it, and the only thing it does, it's a measuring device. I'm going to sound maybe like a bit of a hard ass here, but when I was a contractor, I would send a guy home for using the wrong trowel. And the reason being is I saw a $12 trowel cost a guy $90,000 in repairs. They had an issue with the floor. The inspector came out. He brought out his calipers. He determined that the wrong trowel was used on the project, and that was the end of the story. So I think it's very important. This is a sidebar on the trowels. And then we'll talk a minute about warranties. So, this is also my personal and professional opinion. Let's say I think that unlimited warranties can sometimes set contractors up for failures. If you're, in order to get an unlimited, you need to have 100% coverage in most cases. And I sometimes wonder if the gamble isn't that, our adhesive is so good that no matter what the moisture situation is, we can handle it. I think sometimes the gamble is the contractor is never going to be able to meet the conditions to get it because the undulations in the subfloor and what have you. And then in some cases, that unlimited warranty defaults to a 3 pounds 75 RH warranty, which, by the way, is pretty much an entry-level moisture protection. So if we're using sometimes up to 40% more adhesives, you're getting a 3 pound 75. It concerns me in the industry. Again, it's my personal opinion as well. I think it's interesting to note that I think it was in 2019 that StarNet and Fuse Alliance members got together to talk about the two biggest concerns in the industry. One of those concerns is something that we're all facing is a labor shortage. But the other concern was moisture failures on slabs with hardwood floors. So I think to myself, here we are in 2020 now, 2019, and why, with all the technology and all the unlimiteds and all the testing that's available now, would this still be the case? So let's take best case scenario. Your brother-in-law is the adhesive rep. You golf with him every other Saturday, and you see him 2 times a year at holidays, and he says, "You know what? I'm going to cover your warranty here." If anybody's ever pulled out a floor off a slab, you know that it's the worst job in this industry. Look at your profit margins, how much more work you have to generate to make up for one failure. And so I just think, I caution people. I still think it's a good idea to test slabs. Like I said, there's third-party people that can do that. Bona warranties our adhesive up to 18 pounds and 95 RH. And, we're celebrating our 100-year anniversary this year, as a matter of fact. And we know where wood wants to live. And I don't want to put one of my guys in a situation where thinking that, no matter what happens, that you don't have to worry about it. So specifying for the future, when changes in technology that improve the quality of products and add to the quality of life, it is sort of our responsibility to provide to our customers. I look at, like I talked about, these buildings get buttoned up so tight, the expectations that are put on the adhesives and the flooring contractors today and the fast-paced construction. And if you look at what you have going on your side of the equation, and how many things you've got going against you, going back to that slide with the hidden sources of moisture and other things and the subfloor issues that aren't exactly what we want, it's a good way to protect ourselves from that. So we discussed how to specify wood flooring adhesives for longevity and positive human health, why subfloor preparation is critical for long-term performance, how the installation materials and methods will impact the wood floor's life cycle, how responsible adhesive specifying improves indoor and air sound quality. And again, my name is Wayne Highlander. I'm the National Sales Manager at Bona Adhesives. I want to say this, well, I'll take some questions here before I go. A colleague of mine went to the FCICA convention in Nashville a few weeks ago. And, we look around that room. It's a who's who of great floor contractors in America. We know that. And it was an honor for us to be there. And the FCICA did just a smoking good job. I mean, it was really admirable to see the guys, all the networking, all the education, all the camaraderie was really pretty cool. So I want to thank you for having us at the convention. And so I'll go see if we have any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Wayne. We were happy to have you guys there with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
As we said at the beginning, sorry?
No, thank you very much, Kim.
Yeah. As we said at the beginning, if you guys have any questions, just head over to that Q&A section and add them in there. We'd love to have them. And we've got a couple sitting in here already. Wayne, if you're ready.
Sure.
All right. So I know you mentioned Advantech Subfloor. Somebody asked, we have a project on Advantech Subfloor that we want to nail and glue the floor, but we don't want to put down, or if we don't put down building paper, I'm worried that we won't get any moisture protection. Will the glue give moisture protection? Yeah,
actually, and I say this, and I'd say this no matter what manufacturer I was representing. If you're on a wood subfloor and the subfloor is high, it's a possibility your floors can still cup. But the use of the Bona R540, that's what it's designed to do. So if you're using Advantech, you can use the R540. It is your primer, and also it's your moisture protection as well.
Okay, awesome. Another one in here, you also talked about the urethane versus silane adhesives. Can you give just a couple of the main differences between the urethane adhesives when compared to the silane?
Yep. I think the main thing, one of the main things is that you can't get the moisture protection per square foot with a urethane that you can a silane. The silanes are so much easier to remove if they dry on the floor. And, of course, the zero VOCs and Green Guard certified with ours.
Right. Awesome. And then it looks like this is the last one we've got for right now. You mentioned third parties doing moisture testing. If I wanted to get a third party to do moisture testing, who would I be able to contact to set that up?
There are NWFA certified inspectors across the country. And shame on me, at your convention, you had a guy from San Francisco who had a booth across from us, and I've been trying to think of his name that's at the convention, and I know they do third-party testing, but if not for that, National Wood Flooring Association inspectors are all across the country. They're trained to do this. And also, by the way, if you don't do a lot of testing and you're not comfortable doing testing, this puts the onus on them. And then you start, keep your records on that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see if I can figure out who was across from you guys at the trade show.
Yeah, sorry. A gentleman was from San Francisco. I forget his name. So hope he forgives me.
Do you remember what your booth number was? Oops.
I don't remember, no.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we have plenty of great members who can do moisture testing.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, we've got another question here in the pot. All right, you mentioned that adhesives that ask for 100% coverage can be a challenge, but typically these are for moisture reasons. Wouldn't you want to ensure 100% coverage anytime you're protecting against moisture problems?
Well, you do, but here's the thing, and I went to a class one time from adhesive manufacturer. This is when I was a contractor and going to schools. And the day before, we had a room that was about a 10-foot by 10-foot room. It's a pretty controlled environment. And the first day, we spread out Ardex, get that floor dead flat. And this guy leading the class was the main guru. Like, he's the stud that's showing all the rest of his guys how to do this and to get to 100% coverage. The problem that I encountered, and the problem that I encounter after job that I go to across the country, is that every board we pulled up on that job did not have 100% coverage. It can be difficult to achieve, very difficult. I mean, your subfloor prep better be absolutely pristine. And I don't mean 360 and 10-foot span. It probably ought to be better than that. And also with the channeling on the back of some wood floors, I think it's almost impossible to get it. So. Oh, and I'm told we were at booth number 38.
Yes, it looks like you guys were across from IFB company.
Good.
So.
Okay.
All right, I don't see any questions coming in there, so I guess we're going to wrap it up. I'm sure everybody can reach out to you if they've got more questions.
Please do, and thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. On behalf of FCICA, thank you, Wayne, for presenting today's webinar, sponsored by Bona. Sims, I know we've got a couple of you guys on the line. You can now navigate to the Submit Credit tab to complete the feedback survey and receive your credit. If you didn't sign in, if you just typed your name in, you might not see that working. So if you see that, just jump out, sign in, jump back in, and it should work for you. So if you have any questions, just let me know. I know we can see that you're on the webinar. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.